Reuploaded, and welcome to Sage Gaming Podcast Anniversaries, Tina Stormblood Volume 2, I guess you would call that. I am back here with actually Tina for the second time, discussing her travails and travels through the Stormblood expansion of Final Fantasy XIV. Hello Tina, thank you for coming back, despite us scaring you yesterday.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, lovely to have you back. Well, we have today one rather big topic. Well, we probably have more than one, but I think we should start with a few of the questions I have gotten, and just some of the happy things that we can start with. So, let's start with one of your, a couple of least favorite things. So, favorite and least favorite new primal.
I think my most favorite of the new primals. I think it's a tie between Bayako and Susano, just because they're genuinely just having fun with you,
Yep.
and like it's great. They aren't menacing. They aren't trying. There's no ulterior motive. They're just like, I want to fight.
Yeah.
I guess for Bayako there is, but his ulterior motive is, hey, I have to let out a bunch of energy so I don't turn evil. Can you please help me that task?
I think the reason I love Susano is because he's basically the anti-Xenos in a lot of ways. He wants exactly the same thing from you. He just wants it for different reasons.
Yeah, and he just genuinely wanted a good time.
Yeah.
Least favorite is Sri Lakshmi.
Yeah.
She is terrifying because she plays on the emotions of people and manipulates them, and it's all just so she can brainwash you. And they did a really good job, even in her theme, of emphasizing that is all she is focused on.
She might also be the only real primal we have seen so far who don't actually seem to give even the slightest bit of interest in her followers themselves.
Nothing, not to. She does care, but only in the sense that her followers are like objects, they're like vanity objects for her, which I guess makes sense considering how the Kalana view her as a primal, because the primals take
the primal take shape based on their followers. This is true. But again, she just no, I don't disagree with you. She seems to me to be the only really genuinely evil primal we have met so far.
Yeah,
if you want to call it that.
Yeah, she's an interesting one, and quite terrifying actually. So I didn't like her. Her fight was very fun. All the fights have been great. There's not one that I hate from a fight mechanic perspective. They were all pretty good.
Yeah. So that was pretty good. Right. Well, let's move on to the next one of those kinds of things. Favorite class quests in this expansion.
Favorite is very easy. I liked Dark Knight. The conclusion to Dark Knight was probably one of the best ones. And then Warrior and Sam are also very high up there. And I genuinely did not hate any of the quests in Stormblood. They all were pretty satisfying. They were pretty good ways to close down the class quests, because I know we're going to role quest after. And I just genuinely didn't hate any of them. They were all great.
I admit I am having a particular fondness for the Scholar one, just because the Lala/Tonberry love story was both hilarious and adorable.
I love that. He's like, can't you see this is a pretty young woman?
Yeah.
It's just a Tonberry. And granted, and she is a woman, but Tonberries have no features. All Tonberries look exactly the same. So I'm just like, okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, she is a lovely young woman, eventually.
Yes.
Yeah. I just love that one. I don't know why I love that one. It's just that one just really got to me. Just because I think it was really sweet, really.
Yeah.
Favorite factions of the expansion. Favorite factions of the new guys, like for instance the Steppe people, the Domas, the expanded Garleans, the Girabanians.
Favorite is probably the Steppe, just because I found I found the way they were portrayed extremely interesting. It's tribal cultures of Zayla, and they all have their little quirks to them, and you get to learn quite a bit about many of them. And I just found that interesting. And they all come together like every couple of years or so to have a giant fight, and whoever wins basically is the king of the steppe and gets to make big decisions. But what I liked about the most part is even though they have the Hatun who makes all the big decisions.
Yeah, the Great Khan, basically.
They all basically are like governed by themselves. So it's like, oh, this person just gets to decide if we go to war or not.
Yep.
And that's all they do. And they're just like, they aren't actually a king. It's just a very interesting setup.
And of course, it delivers us both Serena and Magnai and Sadu, who are rather spectacular characters in their own right. So nothing bad there, as I would say.
No.
Favorite dungeon, least favorite dungeon, or at least favorite dungeon.
I think probably my most favorite is the one in the Ruby Sea, where you go in there and you have to try to you have to actually go.
The one where you have to find the Ruby Princess.
Yes. I liked that one a lot just because it's fun. It was a fun dungeon for me, mechanic wise, and it just very pretty. The aesthetic was gorgeous. I think my least favorite is Arbitorium Hard, just because that dungeon actually is hard. And I was in a group with 4 people, and I think we wiped 6 times on the final boss because the mechanic is not intuitive if you go in.
No, it is not.
So
I don't know. I think my least favorite is still Bottom's Medal, just because I feel the middle one is the middle part is boring. But
I liked them attempting to do something new, but I'll agree. It's mostly a lot of standing and kind of having to just follow instructions.
Yeah. And I mean, it's just like fighting a bunch of trash mobs, that's the same constantly. So it's the boss fight that keep you going. I don't know. I just didn't find Bottom's Medal particularly interesting. I would say.
For me, when it comes to deciding a bad dungeon, it's usually the one that annoyed me the most, which would be the Arbitorium Hard. Definitely.
Yeah, no, I can see that. I think my favorite one is Kugane Hard.
I almost selected that one just because the final boss fight is so fun.
Yeah,
because it's Yojimbo.
It really is just amazing. And of course, it ties into something we're going to talk about in a little while. Favorite beast tribe, if you're not allowed to say the Namazu, because I'm pretty sure otherwise that's where we go.
Well, that leaves. Well, then the Kojin. If I can't say Namazu, the Kojin for sure. Yeah. Not that the Ananta one is bad. Actually, I would say all the Stormblood beast tribe, their quests are well worth doing. They're very enjoyable. But the one, it got me right, like in the heart because of how touching it actually is.
I have never felt that strongly about a puppet before in my life.
Yeah, I cried over the puppet, like full on. I was like, "This is so sad," and it has no right being as sad as it is.
No, it doesn't. Anyway, let's get to it because of course I was being mostly facetious. Namazu, talk to me about the Namazu quest line.
Namazu is it's so enjoyable, and I think you have that for the crafting part of it because it is a crafter gatherer focused. So I think you just need it to be enjoyable. Otherwise, because it's one of the ones that it takes a lot. Like it can take a lot of time if you're not fully into crafting to do it real quick. And so like I I think they had to put a lot of work into it, and it's basically just the comic relief quest. So whereas the Kojin one, it got me right in the heart because it's very touching. The Namazu one is just pure hilarity, and it's great.
Yes, like an entire race seemingly dedicated to self-eradication, accidentally somehow managing to stumble through.
Somehow not dying.
Somehow
We're-
not dying. And of course being looked upon by everyone else with a mix of like annoyance that even the Mughals might struggle to attain, and then just but they're very tasty at the same time. You want to eat them. And this is these are the good factions that really wants to like eat them off.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
there's multiple people. I think there's one quest where you have to go around the steppe and basically ask for the Namuzu's permission to be there.
Yeah.
And you go to each of the tribe leaders, which is Serena,
Magnai and Hasado.
Magnai, and they all basically say, "Aren't they really tasty?"
Yeah. Even Serena is like, I could have catfish for dinner tonight.
I wonder how they taste in booze. And it's like, oh god.
That, by the way, let me just do a quick rant on Serena, because this is one point where I'm like, game, you don't have to be a tease here. It's so obvious that she and Hien has something going, and they can't marry because he. Yes, they can. Of course they can. The Mole won the big tournament. They would be an obvious grouping to forge diplomatic relationship through political marriages with. Like,
I think
get those two together, please.
I think it wouldn't just be that, though. It wouldn't just be because I don't see Hien being that strong towards tradition, but it's just that I don't see Serena ever wanting to leave her tribe.
I know.
From there. That's probably more of the issue.
They are just also very cute together. I do have a romantic streak after all. Right, let's go to the last bit of sheer unadulterated humor in the game. Hildebrand, Mr. Hildebrand, Mandeville. Your thoughts on Hildebrand compared to the previous ones?
Where I think we're back to like the pure comedy. Not that Heaven's Ward didn't have comedy; it did. It's hilarious, but it was much more like heartfelt and touching.
Yeah.
And just like it was back to being like a mystery, solving a mystery in a very hilarious way. And I liked the return to form, as it would say, as you could say, and it was just it was everything I expected from Hildebrand.
Yup.
And it was a very enjoyable. I think I spent a whole day just doing that quest.
I'm partial to Hildebrand. Again, I was very, very sorry when we didn't get a Shadowbringer Hildebrand expansion.
Yeah, I mean that's actually I am upset about that.
Yeah. One gets to it, but it was just like I like that stuff. I really like that stuff. It's a nice, especially after like the big emotional patches at the end. It's like to just go over there and just revel in the insanity of it all. And if there is one thing our dear boy Hildebrand does, it's insanity very well.
Yeah, I mean, there has to be a balance to it. If only because you have all of these like giant set pieces going on and very emotional things happening, and you need some hilarity. And I think Shadowbringers does this fairly well, because so far I know, and Stormblood did it too, where we would have these very emotional scenes, and then you would have some like downtime to like recover, and then they would have something very funny happen, so it wasn't just doom and gloom.
Exactly. And again, it's just that I still say you should wait with Hildebrand until everything is out and just do them in one big go, if at all possible. Just because, but it's just There's just something about it that makes me laugh. Maybe because they just revel in how incredibly outrageous they can do it, and the testing of various like technical aspects of it and how far they can go with graphical limits and facial expressions and so on. I'm very happy with Hildebrand, and I'm also very happy, by the way, because it's one of the few places where we see one of the wolf people in a relatively major role. And if I have one complaint about Stormblood, I have a couple, but if I have one complaint about Stormblood I want to touch on, is the fact that they introduce this wonderful wolf race and then do absolutely nothing with them.
Yeah, that's one of my complaints too, because they were just very interesting, and they're in one side quest which you need to unlock the Namazu,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
then only featured prominently really in the Hildebrand stuff. And it's just like you have this race that is unbelievably interesting, and you just shelf them, and it's very. But I guess that has happened before. There's a couple of races that get absolutely no screen time.
No,
absolutely.
and some of it again is probably a victim of the two expansions being slammed together to make one problem.
Mm-hmm.
I am certain if like the Doma arc had been an entire expansion in and of itself, we would have seen something about that. I don't know for sure, but I would think they were I think they might have been a victim of just not enough time, really. But
yeah,
I don't know. We'll figure that. I'm sure we'll work that out. I feel like that was a missed opportunity because I really feel like they were an interesting race we could have worked with.
Yeah, I mean, I would have even thought that would have been, personally, that would have been like a player race. Like that could have been a really cool.
I thought of that. Yeah, exactly.
And I probably would have. That might have been a race that I would have played. Even as much as I love the Ura, there's something about playing a giant wolf man that just sounds fun.
Yep. Exactly. Right. Well, in that case, let's move on to one of my absolute favorite aspects of Stormblood, which is the raid series, or I don't know if you want to call them raid series. Let's start with the Four Lords. What is your opinion on the whole Four Lords thing?
That was very interesting because they're not really primals. I know when we were talking about primals, I considered them primals because they're trial fights.
Yeah, but they're not primals. No, I wouldn't.
They're not primals. They don't take ether from the land in the same way primals do. It seems like their existence is actually beneficial.
Yeah.
Because more just the way that they're explained is that they're basically animals or creatures that have lived for so long that they turn into gods.
Yeah, more or less. Or demigods at the very least, yeah.
And that's kind of a curse in itself, because it turns out that eventually they will live for so long that they will, if they don't find some way to pass on, they will actually like turn evil and basically go mad with rage or anger or whatever, which is part of with the Four Lords, because we're dealing with one of the auspices that has become uncontrollable is about to break free, and we need these four very powerful ones, and but they are about on the edge of what they can handle. So you have to basically fight them and bring them back to their senses, essentially.
Mm-hmm. By the way, did you notice now that you are into Shadowbringers and have had a couple of conversations with our Artbird, did you notice the relatively not 1-to-1, but a fairly decent comparison between Artbird's story with certain aspects and Shenzhen and his experience with the Four Lords?
Maybe I don't think I'm far enough in to make a complete comparison, because there's definitely some things that I am missing.
Well, I mean, you spoke to. I mostly meant you already spoke to Seto, who is basically. It's like they basically took aspects of the Four Lords storyline for Seto.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. Now I get what you're inferring. Yeah, actually, there's definitely some comparisons to it.
Mm-hmm.
But I've only seen that so far with Seto. So I think there's definitely more to the story of Ardbert. So I don't.
Oh no! I didn't mean Artbird as such. I just meant the art. Yeah, I could have said Seto from the beginning. It's more like Artbird. Like Artbird matches the ancient samurai with Seto being, his animal companion, so to speak. I just found it interesting how it seems like they took quite literal. Like it kind of felt like they had more to say with the Four Lords than they felt they could get away. They could do in like an optional storyline, and then took aspects of that into Shadowbring. I just thought that was interesting. It also, of course, the Four Lords, or the whole.
I see what you're implying. I think I need more time.
No, honestly, I'm not implying. I am not implying anything. I am not implying more than I'm saying. This was just.
Oh, okay.
I just find that interesting that there are those two aspects. Don't take this as a expectation of further plot developments, because you will be very disappointed.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah, and I wouldn't spoil like that, by the way. It also, of course, the Four Lords, or the whole Hell's Lit thing, has one of my absolute favorite moments, which is the fact that we are involving Tataru in the whole thing. It's so nice to see her in the field.
It is very nice, but she is also very bad at it.
Yes, that's why it's funny. There is that one fight, and I can't remember which one it is. I want to say it's the Gyaku, the turtle fight, but it might be a solo duty similar. But there is that fight where she's literally trying to help you in combat, and is basically spending all of it running around chasing her carbuncle that's trying to escape. And
yes,
I was this close to dying in that battle because I was too focused on Tataru's antics. It's like just running around chasing this carbuncle, like, come back! Desertion is punishable by death. My death! It's like, I don't know, I just died. I don't know, I just love that one. I love Tataru. It's a well-known fact that I'm a big fan of Tataru. It's just seeing her active in a storyline, even in a comical sense, was very pleasing to me.
I love that we definitely got some time with her, which is probably a good thing, because it seems like things are very dire, especially at the expansion when she starts crying.
Yeah.
Because everyone is like gone, and she's like, well, they're not gone, but they have no souls in their body right now.
And we're basically only keeping them alive with Kryl like pouring energy into them, more or less. Oh yeah, that's.
Yeah,
we got to see her.
They're literally on the Eorzean version of life support.
Yeah. I mean, it's just because I really like Tataru and liked her for quite a while, and it's the first time we actually see her do anything. She has spent a lot of time sitting either in the Waking Sands, or the Rising Stones, or the Fallen Snow, I guess. Thank you, Archifant. That still remind me to pay you back for that one if I resurrect you one day. Bloody hell. It was just nice to see her active. Like, she's the one Scion that's been... You've probably seen her more than practically any other Scion, except for Elfino, but she's never actually, like, been anything other than a exposition background character. It was just nice to see her active for once.
It was the first time we got to see her actually have her own quest line, and it was just great. Her and Stormblood were and the fight you're referring to, that fight is great because it is a solo duty.
That's what it is. It is a solo duty. I thought so, but I haven't done it in a while.
They basically use magic to age Stormblood into an auspice, but he gets too much of the magic, and becomes uncontrollable.
Right, that's the one. Yeah.
We have to fight him off. And my favorite part is not only is the carbuncle running away from her for the first part of the fight, at one point she gets a marker and she's like, Kane, come here, come help me.
Yes.
And it's not a stack marker.
No, it's an avoid marker.
A damage marker. Yes. So you have to run away from her.
I just love it so much. Like I said, no offense to anyone who has other favorite scions. I just loved seeing her in action.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the Four Lords, which I just really liked the Four Lords. It was a fun, engaging, interesting storyline. Some really cool fights actually, and
very cool fights. They did
being sorry.
I said some very cool fights. They definitely did some very new and unique mechanics to that one, and it was just genuinely enjoyable.
Not gonna spoil too much, but you might possibly be seeing some of them again going forward. Not impossible.
I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also, even then they managed to get in some fairly like heart-wrenching moments. The one where, you know, the phoenix bird basically think she's fighting against her you know, beloved well, the person she loved at any rate. There at the end, it was very heart-wrenching in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and then at the very end, when Genbu basically sacrifices him. Well, no, Sorbonne sacrifices himself in parentheses because he says that you'll no longer cease to exist, and it turns out that it's actually more like Genbu is passing on the crown to Sorbonne, but that process is going to take like 500 years or something. And so they're both technically still alive at the end, but you don't know it, and they're also sharing one body. So at the end, they have a conversation between themselves, and we're just outside looking in at it. And I think Tataru goes, "Do you think they know we can't hear them?"
Yeah, exactly. It's just I love that. I love that one. Of all of the sort of I don't even know if you can call that a raid series. It's more like a trial series, I guess.
But yeah, it's not a raid series. I call it a trial series.
Of all of them, I think that is my favorite. I have to admit. But there is a raid series, which I think we will go into now. Wasn't it nice to see Nero back? Shouldn't he and Sid, like, I'm not even like a slash figure, but shouldn't he and Sid just kiss and get it over with?
Oh my god. Like, Omega is the story of Nero and Sid getting their second and third divorce at the same time.
Yes!
And figuring out who Alpha goes to in the divorce.
I know! Oh, that Alpha. I am still using Omega. My Alpha minion. I have not changed my minion since I got Alpha. I don't care. He's the most adorable thing I've ever seen.
I definitely change minions every time I log on, but when I get Alpha, I keep him.
Yeah.
Good day. It's a good omen.
He's just a good little bird. No, I like the Omega series. Like you said, the interaction between Sid and Nero and the entire just the look into the Garlean Ironworks, because I mean they've been a part of the game since 1.0 really, but especially for those of us who haven't played back in 1.0, it's the first time we actually see what like Sid does when he's not subordinated to whatever you are doing at the present. And
even then, it's still not technically what he actually does, because
Jessie is
like
very
she
clear
calls
on that.
It a side project.
Yeah. But that moment where I just in the beginning of it, where Nero is like, I'm a sensitive and gentle employee that needs constant encouraging. Maybe you should encourage yourself to bugger off.
Encourage yourself to piss off.
Yeah.
My favorite part is when I unlocked Omega. No, when I got the cutscene at the end after finishing Stormblood, that basically reveals Omega.
Yeah.
it was weather. It took on whatever weather was in that area at the time, and for whatever reason, it was thunderstorming.
Oh, yeah.
As Nero is taking off his glasses, thunder goes down in the background, and I'm like, this is making him look a lot cooler than he actually is.
Yes! Because that's another thing. I mean, it really shows. I mean, listen, Sid is one of the strongest allies we have in the game. It's one of the best. Everyone loves Sid, but we also know he's Sid, right? And he's Final Fantasy XIV Sid. Nero, we really only sort of knew from the Praetorium. Like, really. We've seen him sort of on and off, but we really only knew him from the Praetorium. And again, just getting to know him and that he is just as silly and petty as anyone else was a godsend, I feel.
Yeah, I mean, I love the fact that it gives a lot of love to some of the most well-known games in the series. 5 and 6 specifically, they got their own tiers. And then you have Chaos being one of the fights in 1 in the final tier, the very first. And then you go, and then it gets really emotional and weird for the next 3 fights, because you fight the one enemy Omega couldn't conquer, which is Midgard Solmar.
Yeah.
As he was fleeing from his planet with his children, and he basically beat Omega, and Omega followed him, and then you fight Omega, and then you go through this really emotional scene where Omega basically tries to kill you again by deleting you, and you don't know that you've lived because you find out at the end of the scene, but you just see Alpha running across the emptiness of space, essentially. And you start seeing Omega's personal thoughts on its situation. And at the end of it, you'd come to realize that all he ever wanted to do, why he did this whole thing, is he wanted to go home.
Yep.
Because he's lonely.
Yep.
And he misses his home. And he basically has come to the conclusion that he can't go home. And so at the end of it, when it reveals you're alive, he faces off with what I keep saying he's a he, but it's Omega, so it's a robot.
Whatever.
But so Omega comes to the conclusion that he's going to become you, and so he fights as female and male Omega, and at the end of it, when you beat him, it just comes to kind of accept its fate, that it can't go home, and then you find out at the end it ends up just traveling with Alpha.
Yeah. Which is
just accepts it. It's
sweet
now.
Yeah. I also like the series because I have said before, one of the things I like about Final Fantasy XIV is how it sort of acts like an overall matrix of the entire Final Fantasy franchise.
But in a very respectful way.
In a very respectful way, because what it doesn't do is say everything that happened in 9, for instance, was only like a reflection of or for that matter of 6, 7, all the others. What it does is like it takes the stories and integrates them into 14. It's not that 14 is the most important in any way, or that is the real one, where the others are aspect of that. It's that the whole Eureka thing, which is like, no, this isn't like the original game. This isn't like the real story of the original game. This is how that game happened in Final Fantasy XIV, or in the Final Fantasy XIV world. And I really like how much they have managed to like put together everything. I mean, 7 I think is the only one we haven't really expounded too much upon.
7 has some references every here and now, especially side quests, but yeah, it hasn't been overtly referenced, I would say.
I don't think we've seen too much of 10 either, but most of the others are there, one way or the other.
Yeah, I like the fact that they definitely take inspiration, and sometimes they basically use direct references to them, but they're always something different. It's not something that's being repeated.
No, that's what I mean. They're not saying this is the real story of this game, or this is how we think the game. This is the story, which you can easily recognize, but this is how it functioned in our world, which of course works slightly different than the original game world, so to speak.
Yeah, it comes off as more of a homage than a direct inspiration, which I think is great.
Exactly. And again, just some of the fights in Omega was just fun. It really was just fun. They really just was fun. I was so happy to go back and fight the train. I don't know why. that just hit a nerve with me. Well, not a nerve. It just hit like a moment with me.
That was one of my favorite fights, if only because it was just so fun. Like I don't know how to describe it, except it was such a fun fight.
Yeah.
Overall.
Exactly. But that's exactly, I mean, that's in a lot of ways exactly how to put it. Not all like some of my favorite like trials and so on throughout the game isn't necessarily the end of what I would have considered my favorite storylines or my favorite moments. Some of them are just because the fights themselves are super fun to do. Like, I don't know, I generally have a fondness, I know it's silly, I have a really big fondness for the original Howling Eye stuff, the original Garuda fights. But I just loved them at the time. Yeah, they're very basic these days, but I had a lot of fun with them when I started out, and that's just that always matters to me.
Agreed.
But let's get to something a little bit more serious then. Oh yes, I did get a question I should eventually probably ask. Tina, why are you a clicker?
Because I just haven't gotten around to it to doing any other way. But like, so I mentioned I've never played MMOs before, and I'm not really a PC gamer. So for me, this is completely relatively new territory. So I just found the way that was most comfortable to do it. But I will acknowledge that it is getting significantly harder to effectively play the farther I get in doing I'm definitely looking to practice and improve.
Again, it's just someone asked that question. I know you've answered it several times before, but I kind of felt like one should have it there no matter what.
No, it's fine. I don't mind. I understand the comments and I understand the criticism, because if it definitely does get harder. It wasn't so hard in like A Realm Reborn, Heavensborn, and Stormblood, but I feel like I'm not playing as effectively as I could because I'm probably playing in a really way that's very inconvenient. I can recognize that.
Yeah, I mean that's just how things are. You don't have to like it, but such is things. But again, if someone brought it up, then I feel like I should, at the very least, ask the question, so to speak. Oh yes, and of course the question we got on Twitter. Why do you use the word sometimes when describing how much you talk about Final Fantasy XIV?
Because
instead of all time, I assume is the inference.
I would say, have made a content change on my Twitter account, and that's just was for my own sanity, frankly. Because I was like, you know what is not making me happy? Tweeting about world events and all of this nonsense that's going on. But you know what does make me happy? Tweeting about stuff that I actually like.
Yeah.
So that's more or less. So yeah, it is. I would still say it is sometimes. I don't think I'm just tweeting about it constantly. It's not the only thing featured on my profile, but it's definitely taken over in a way.
To be fair, the person that asked this question very obviously mentioned that it was an attempt at bullying. But you know, it was a fair question, so I figured it should be asked.
Yeah, no, they're fine. Yeah, bullying is kind of no one actually bullies me on Twitter
Do you enjoy being bullied when it comes to Final Fantasy XIV, Tina? Be
because
honest.
it's all in good nature.
Yeah.
It's not actually being mean.
No. I mean, the fact it also. I mean, it's also one of those situations where, yeah, some people do it because they just know you and like you, but most of us also are like, we can't really bully people for loving the game because we love it ourselves, like
Mhm.
to immense degrees. Again, I am amazed at how much I have grown to love this game. I did not expect that even when I finished 2.0, to be honest. But
I didn't expect it either. I expected I would like it. I didn't realize, and I guess I didn't realize just how much of a rut I was in gaming wise because this came out and it refreshed the love of the medium for me because I think it was getting very stale for me,
mm-hmm.
and this has totally made a difference in that way.
Do you think it has helped you in your daily life?
It's definitely helped me with anxiety
Mm-hmm.
because now I have a very good outlet and I can just log on and go do a couple of my roulettes and I feel better.
Yeah.
Um, Especially when I have a particularly challenging day at work, which does happen from time to time.
I mean, I've also noticed, this isn't even on my notes, I hadn't expected to discuss this, but since we're there, I mean, when I got to know you, when I started following you, like, I don't know, a couple of years ago,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you were, like you said, you were basically not a small, but a shit posting account. Clearly, having whatever you wanted to say about stuff and having fights with random bicyclists, but otherwise, like we never knew that much about Tina, and now suddenly you're doing face cam live streams, which, I mean, had I asked you about that 2 years ago, do you think you would have said, yeah, that's something that's definitely coming?
I did not ever see that this ever being a thing. I didn't think I would have an audience for it, and I am just continually surprised that there are people who actually come out and are very interested in watching me get through this game and just interacting with me in other ways. Because there's definitely people who are like, I followed you for Final Fantasy 14, but you're actually really funny.
Yeah,
So I just enjoy your stuff in general,
I mean,
and
yeah, I get that.
so it's definitely I don't I did not expect this coming, and it definitely has gotten me out of my comfort box in a way, um, where I'm willing to do these things.
So thank you, Yoshi P. Should you ever hear that, you have made a positive influence on Tina's life. That's good. Well, I mean, positive for certain level of positive. She's being bullied even more now than ever. But still. But yeah, let's get into the meat of what I think will be today's episode. Or maybe not. But one of the themes, we talked slightly about the themes of Stormblood yesterday, mainly in the discussion. Yesterday, good heavens. We talked mainly something about the themes of Stormblood during our last episode. Not because we were shooting this 2 days in a row. Mainly regarding whether or not maybe the expansion had been a little bit too real in certain aspects rather than more heroic fantasy and so on. But there is one particular theme I really wanted to hear your take on and maybe have a little bit of discussion on. And that has to do with the fact that two of your favorite characters, not your two favorite characters necessarily, but two of your favorite characters are people like Xenos and Yutsuyu. So I want to have you or discuss with you the difference between empathy and understanding for villains, and the difference between having empathy and understanding for villains and rooting for them or feeling like they need preferential treatment or salvation, so to speak. Because I've seen that come up both on your Twitter and other Twitter accounts from time to time, where it's like, especially because it's ingrained in the story with Yutsu, with all the stuff she has done. I mean, to the people of Doma, does she really deserve, like, does she actually deserve redemption despite her terrible past?
I think it's very hard there are very few people that I think are beyond redemption. I would say Xenos kind of is, and he even rejects it. He agrees with that statement. To an extent, he rejects it. Yotsuyu, I don't think was beyond redemption. I think she could have I think she could have lived out her life with Gosetsu, and just been a traveling companion of his, and they went away from Doma, and that would have been fine. It wouldn't. I wouldn't necessarily have redeemed her, but it would have been. It would have been a suitable fate. I feel.
I agree. It could, but again, that's that you think that should. I mean, if it was Tsuyu, I would agree with you 100%. To a certain degree, even if it was Yutsuyu after Asahi had brought her memory back, I would to a certain degree agree with you. But let's say Yutsuyu, instead of dying, she didn't die, but instead of dying at Doma Castle, had just, I surrender. What should have been the fate of her?
I mean,
because I understand. You understand everything about why she became the way she became, but is that really an excuse for treating other people maybe even more horrifying than she has been treated herself? Because she's not exactly being nice to people.
No, it's definitely it's hard. It's hard because
again, it's not because I'm putting you on the hook for Yutsuyu. It's because I feel like that is an interesting, or Xenos for that matter. It's because I feel like it's an interesting discussion of one of the themes of Stormblood. Because one of the themes I feel about Stormblood is exactly the concept of redemption, forgiveness, and acceptance, despite or even in spite of crimes committed.
Well, in terms of redemption, I don't think anyone is beyond redemption. I don't think you can necessarily fully redeem for the amount of harm you've done to people, but you can always try to make things better. You can always try to make up what you have done. You may not be successful, but there's always a chance that you can do that if you're given the chance. I think in terms of forgiveness and justice, those are two completely different concepts from redemption. You can always work towards redemption, no matter what. There are people, like in real life, who have done horrible things in jail, and they do good things in jail to kind of redeem themselves and make themselves like better in society. And it still may not make a difference in their fate. They still may be locked up for life, but they can do what they can behind bars, and I respect that. As far as forgiveness and justice, though, what is a just treatment for someone? It may not be even giving them a chance of redemption. I think if Yotsuyu had just surrendered and Xenos had somehow surrendered, I think the most just punishment for them would have probably been execution, just because of the sheer amount of pain they caused. And I would understand that. And I think they both would have accepted it. I think that's one reason why Fordola was so surprised, because Lise was actively like, I'm not going to execute you. And it was not what she expected. And as far as forgiveness, that's a personal decision. And I'm not one of those people who's like, you need to forgive people to make yourself feel better. I think if you want to hold a grudge forever, you can hold a grudge forever, and that's your prerogative. But it's up to forgiveness is a choice of an individual, and whether you choose to forgive someone, that's your choice. But not everyone deserves forgiveness.
I mean, since we touched on Fordola, there's one thing I want to say about that, because I find that interesting. Fordola, I mean, Lise, I'm not saying Lise did this for the reasons I'm about to say, because Lise is honestly too good a person, and honestly, I think too politically or psychologically naive to do stuff like that, even if she had the inclination, which I don't think she has. I'm not sure that that the nicest thing to do for Fordola would be to grant her a chance for redemption. I think in her case, she would have preferred to be executed right there and then. instead of actually having to put in effort to grant the forgiveness of someone who is probably never going to give it to her, i.e. herself, if no one else.
Yeah, she's the out of the three, she's the one that probably has the most empathy for the situation, and she definitely let her anger get the better of her.
Mm-hmm.
I think now she has to literally live with herself with what she's done, and unlike Xenos and Yatsuyu, I think it genuinely bothers her, some of the stuff that she did, and she is having a hard time learning to live with herself.
Mm-hmm. Again, that's Fordola. Fordola's like the worst thing the cruelest thing done to Fordola is to basically tell her, get up and actually try to live with yourself, dear. We're not going to allow you to get out easily.
Mm-hmm.
Which executing her would be. But I mean, I agree, but it's partially, actually, this discussion is also partially to sort of make up for my anti-Xenos tirade, well, not tirade, but discussion yesterday, because I agree with you. Xenos could never be forgiven or redeemed or something else, just because he simply doesn't have it in him. But it doesn't necessarily have to be Xenos as such. It can also be like there is that Garlean commander in like Ganyo, the one that's like treated the citizens very fairly and so on and so on. And
yeah, Alighieri. And
it's down in Alighieri. Sorry, I can never remember which village is which village.
It's a long side quest, and he basically is like hiding there, and all the villagers are like, no, we're not going to turn him in because you're going to execute him, so we will actively fight against you. And you find out that that's not even what was going to happen. No. They all assumed that was what was going to happen, but they just wanted to talk to him because they were like, we know that he has information on some stuff that we're interested in. We have no interest in like executing him for anything because, if we do that, it seems like the townspeople will actually riot.
Yeah. The villagers are coming out with pitchforks.
But I also think that it's a different situation with him because he didn't have anything to redeem himself for. Yes, he was with the Garlean army, but he didn't treat the people badly. He understood the situation sucked, and he was like, I'm going to treat these people like people. So, yeah, he didn't think he deserved redemption, but, I mean, in my opinion, he didn't do anything really wrong. He was following his orders to the barest minimum that he had to, but he made sure to treat the people that he was dealing with like people. And that ended up working out well for him in many ways because the people who he defended actively fought against any punishment for him at all.
Yep. No, I don't disagree with you regarding him, and I don't disagree with you regarding anyone, really. Like I said, I just find that a very interesting thematic discussion to tie together with sort of like the one we had yesterday, where things are very real. Like, in many ways, things are very real in this expansion. Mm-hmm. Because, like you said, no, he didn't do anything wrong, but let's say that Ilbert survived. What should be done with Ilbert? Because he basically he would have gotten everything he wanted. Ilbert would have happily gone to his death because Alamigo was free. That was all he ever wanted.
I would have...
The amount of stuff he did is not particularly nice, to put it mildly.
I actually would have at the beginning of the expansion, I would have had him executed, but I actually, because I was grinding Balsier's Wall for his card, which you can, I believe, only get from his dungeon. And
I haven't seen it anywhere else, at least.
Yeah, I ran it for like a straight month, and I've been with that fight so many times. And I will say that there's at one point, I don't remember if it's in the dungeon or if it's in the cutscenes, but I remember him specifically saying, even though you don't deserve it, I'm going to free our homeland. I would not have killed him. I would have made him live and see his homeland prosper, just so he could eat his words for what he did. It's and it's not, and because I think that is its own karma, because he said in his moment of of his ultimate moment before he died that you don't deserve it, but I'm going to do this. And I was like, but they did deserve it, and they fought for it, and they won. And yes, you spurred the initial action, but it didn't end in a bloody massacre that you wanted.
But in that case, do you then want him to be punished like that because of your personal enmity towards him, unlike, say, Yutsu, who you have a much more positive emotional relationship to? Like the player, Tina, not the character, Kane.
No, that's just me on a personal level. And I take Yatsu and him very differently, because Yatsu treated the world the way that the world treated her. She was treated like an object, so she treated other people like an object. Eelsbeard, he had friends, he had family. Yes, he lost his family, but he had them. He had people that he cared about. The people who he was rallying, they cared about him. They thought that, they agreed with what he said. He motivated them, and it was all to sacrifice them and just use their love and loyalty against him. And that is, I would want him to live to see the damage he caused, and also that the people that ended the situation better than he ever could, because he just wanted to massacre as many people as possible at that point. He didn't want to, in order to free Aligo. So I would show him that your bloodshed and your, like, the way that you did it, it didn't really impact the result at all. We still solved it fairly peacefully with as little blood as possible. So I think it is different. Whereas I think Yotsuyu should have been... I think she should have been given a chance to achieve redemption. She just came to the decision that she just wasn't worth it. But I view Eelsbeard's crimes as worse.
Mm-hmm. Despite the fact that she probably caused more direct suffering than he did, and probably a lot more blood being spilled over the years she was Viceroy.
I'll agree. If we are just judging by the totality of their actions, then yeah, for sure. She probably caused way more damage overall, and definitely probably killed a lot more people. Because only because we were able to stop Shinryu before it was able to go on a massacre. Yeah. But it's just the understanding of their motives and knowing their past. Eelsbeard's betrayal is, in multiple ways, hurts worse than anything Yotsuyu did, because Yotsuyu was just acting she was just reflecting how the world taught her to treat people. And Eelsbeard had the good things, had felt the good things that the world has to offer, and just decided, I'm going to use these people for my own cause. So and that is an individual thing for me, because I know that there are people who are going to definitely view that as different, and I just view him as morally worse, personally.
Yeah, no, I actually don't disagree with you. I know I've been playing a bit of devil's advocate here, but it's mostly because I saw this discussion. I don't know how much do you look at all your notifications on Twitter? Because I have to imagine they get overwhelming from time to time.
I've got certain terms muted so I don't see them. And then I just get I no lie, I get at least 1,000 notifications a day.
Yeah, I would imagine.
I have my Twitter notifications, for anyone who watches this, sometimes they break and I will get a reply that I never actually get a notification for. Yeah. So, and the only reason I see it is because people start responding to it. And that happens multiple times a day, usually.
And that's basically why I played a little bit of devil's advocate here, because I actually agree with you, but it was a discussion. I'm sorry about that. It was a discussion that happened in your mentions, or in those, your Twitter threads regarding the game, during that thing regarding, that particular aspect of, Tina simping for the villains, and whether or not there should be punishment and so on. So I just wanted to sort of give those who listen to this a chance to actually hear your overall opinion on the matter in a direct fashion, rather than piecemeal in in various Twitter threads. So I don't actually disagree with you about any of this. To be completely honest, I just wanted to provoke some discussion.
My things on punishment is that it's going to very, very much depend on how your individual morals and ethics are. And there's a reason why this doesn't come into play in like real court cases, because just because you think someone, you can understand why someone turned out the way that they are, does not mean that they should never be punished. And I don't advocate. I think like if we were talking about like realistically, if Yatsuyu was put on trial, I think she would be executed and she would definitely deserve it. I just don't necessarily think that I can understand the justice behind it, but it doesn't feel like a just punishment for taking the totality of her circumstances together.
No,
but
go. Sorry.
It is a well-deserved one.
Yeah, no, that's kind of what I was trying to get. Like, again, just to make sure that people because it was a discussion occasionally. It never turned into like a fight or anything, but it was a recurrent discussion. So I basically just wanted to get your sort of overall opinion on that, because there is a very big difference between having a personal opinion that says, yes, I believe this person should have this and this, should have this and this and this happen to them, and then saying, but under the sort of circumstances and legal ramifications we live under, they will probably be brought to some kind of justice, one way or the other.
It's like, I have sympathy for you, but you also killed a bunch of people, so like you have to answer for that in some way. You can have sympathy for people who have done terrible, terrible things and understand why they ended up the way they are, but the people that they hurt still deserve some form of justice.
Exactly.
And this is a fantasy game, so it's really easy for me to be like, yeah, I would.
Of course.
I think a fair punishment for Yotsuyu would be for her to travel with Gosetsu for the rest of her life as Suyu. But I realize if this was a real situation, the right scenario would actually be life imprisonment and/or execution.
Yeah, exactly. But again, of course, that also comes to one of those situations that probably would never happen in real life, because amnesia at least usually doesn't work like that, in as much that Suyu wasn't Yutsuyu. She was legitimately a different person.
Oh, if this was
during that time, I mean, Suyu deserved nothing from what Yutsuyu did, because they legitimately were different people.
Amnesia doesn't work that way, but you can actually have a full-on psychotic break and be legally unable to receive any punishment. But what would happen is not what would happen. Like, what would happen is that you still basically would eventually be punished for your crimes. What they do in that situation is they put you in like a facility, and when you get better and are able to be legally competent, you then get to face justice for your actions. It's not a get out of jail free card. That's a myth that for whatever reason has perpetuated society, that being insane is a get out of jail free. I'm like, no, it's not. You basically go into a facility until such time you become competent, and then you get to face trial.
Leaving aside that some of the time, in some case, I mean, that's also an American thing, but take Denmark, for instance. We have, because of our fairly low maximum punishment for various things, like our life sentences is 16 years and then you get out in general terms, under most circumstances. If we have someone that like really deserves punishment, the prosecution will usually try to have them convicted to psychological treatment, because that's non-time limited, so you can theoretically keep them in a closed facility for the rest of their natural lives if needs must, under the guise of medical treatment. But again, I just wanted to, because it was a rather big discussion at the time, I just wanted to like provoke your coherent thought on the matter.
Oh, and that's perfectly fine. I expect people to disagree with me because I accept that this is a very individualistic issue, and it comes down to what your beliefs are, and that gets very personal, and what you're willing to forgive people for. And it is also much easier when you're talking about a theoretical situation and it's not actually your family members or people
Exactly.
that being hurt, because this is a fictional game. So like,
Yeah.
I am being hurt emotionally, but that is not the same thing.
No, 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 no. Which then leads to a smaller interesting conversation. Did they waste Ilbert by killing him off that early? Was he someone who could have been gained from by having him around as a later villain? Even just keeping him on the sidelines and then having like a trial at the very end where he tries to take over Alamigo again, and we have to like murderize him in 4.4 or something.
I don't necessarily.
Or was it better? I wouldn't think so. I'm just thinking about because we discussed it during the Heavensward thing that Ilbert was sort of he got what he wanted, and he never really got a punishment from it.
Well, his punishment was death.
His punishment was death, but
you could argue, but
that was also what he had planned the whole time, because that was needed for the Shinryu summons.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard because it's like on one hand, I think he should have stuck around and they shouldn't have just killed him. But at the other hand, he'd been around for quite a while in game. He was pivotal in our first actual trail in game. He was basically the ringleader of that, one of them, and then he comes back in the middle of Heavensward twice, I think, and then it would have been nice to have him stick around, but I don't think it was necessarily required because he had already been around for quite a while.
Yeah, and I also think it was better to kill him off for the sake of the development of Lise and especially Raban.
Yes.
Not having Raban be motivated by his relationship to Ilbert, considering everything they have been through together, from their callow youth to Ilbert like chopping his hand off and throwing him in prison, I feel like it was better for the development of the main characters of Alamigo to have him out of the way, so the story can focus on them as, growing, rather than having to deal with this stuff that was already resolved, one way or the other. As much as it would have been nice to have a trial where you could beat upon him, like really beat upon him. But I mean that's kind of the same thing with it's kind of the same thing with, we talked about during Heavensward with Thordan, where I have seen people say he didn't get any punishment for what he did, you just killed him, which is why I think they added the whole thing about him seeing, the dark you, the black you, and being horrified in his last moments. Because if you notice, that hasn't really come up since then. Not really.
So, not in a way that matters. There's definitely like fishy going on, but
of course,
it's a little bit different.
Of course. So, but I mean, I'm sure it might be touched upon again later, but it was clearly added to give him that last moment of, I'm not just dying, I'm dying with a certain level of punishment.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's more or less getting to be that. Where would you sort of, let's say, overall good and bad? Give me your opinions on the overall good and bad of the expansion as such.
I think the good parts are that the trials and dungeons are definitely very, very good. I would say the characters that do get the focus, that you get a lot of very good character moments in this expansion. There's a lot of world building that's very important. A lot more information on things such as how Garlemald works, and all that is very interesting. I think the worst parts of it are that it clearly was made to be 2 expansions, and because of that, there's some weird pacing, and then there's also just some characterizations that either get really rushed or they don't get the explanation that you need because all the backstory is in side content. And I think it does suffer for that, and I can see why a lot of people do dislike it. Or, well, not dislike it. There are some people who hate it, but a lot of people have just said it's not as good. And I do understand, because it definitely feels... I'm in Shadowbringers right now, and it feels way more polished.
Yeah, definitely. I said before, and I will say it again, Stormblood is a perfectly serviceable and even good, poignant at times, but a perfectly serviceable and even good MMO expansions that just have the misfortune of being sandwiched in between the 2 best MMO expansions of all time. Sorry, Wrath of the Lich King, but that's how I hold Heaven's Ward and Shadowbringers. I actually think Endwalker is even better than either, but that I know that's still being discussed in the community.
Oh yeah, I've seen that. I've seen some of those conversations. I haven't read into much of them for obvious reasons. I don't have an opinion on that right now, but I've definitely seen the arguments on which one is better, Shadowbringers or Endwalker. And that is a very hot topic, apparently.
Yeah. That can actually. I when I first started discussing it, I wouldn't have thought that would cause like heated discussion. More like, this is my preference because of this and this and this, and this is my preference because of it. No, there is emotions at stake there. That's
my god.
Which is why I don't really take it on Twitter anymore, because I was like, why are you angry at me? I just said that. Well, okay, fine, it's Twitter.
It's Twitter, and I love the community. The community is very, very good. Sometimes the community gets really angry at things that are very stupid. That is all I will say, and it makes it difficult when there's a legitimate issue for me sometimes. Because when people are really mad at something, and I have to be like, is this something that really we should be getting mad at? And then I'm like, oh yeah, okay, never mind, that's legit.
Yeah. Well, I think that's more or less it. Is there anything you want to say either about the expansion itself, how it fits in with the game, just the expansion itself, what you have learned from the game, what you have learned about the community, just anything you want to say now that you are post Stormblood, before we end up?
I think Stormblood feels like that filler season in an anime where they put in a bunch of filler, but it's all important world building, so you just kind of have to sit and accept it. But I had a very fun time with it. I didn't ever feel bored. I always felt compelled to play more. There was never a moment where I was actually bored or where I thought this is a slog. I still would say A Realm Reborn is probably the worst expansion, and I would still say that's a 7. Yeah. Well, it's not an expansion; it's the base game, but solid 7. And I think Stormblood is Heaven's Ward would be like a 9.5 to 10, and then Stormblood would be like an 8.5. So it's like very solid. And I think just in general, the community has definitely surprised me with just how friendly people genuinely are, and not just the people who follow me on Twitter. Like even in game, people are very friendly.
I mean, that was a general thing when I came in, and it has been a thing. It took a little bit of a downturn, actually, like about a year ago, and I can't help but wonder if it was influx of not just necessarily WoW refugees, but just new players. Because one thing that I have played a lot of MMOs over the years, and when I came into this, I was like, why am I not being shouted at for doing things wrong? Why are people trying to help me? This is very frightening.
Yeah, I'm people just being genuinely so nice is a new thing I'm not used to, and not even because I played MMOs, but I've played online multiplayer games, and I'm like, no, people are not nice.
No.
I do think I do see what you mean by there was like an influx of kind of rude people, but I think that was just people coming into the game and not fully understanding the culture.
Yes, exactly. That's what I mean. It's not that because I didn't mean that they are bad because they came in from WoW. Just that there was a big influx of people coming in with that are used to a different mindset and needed some time to adjust, because it's much better now than it was a year ago.
Yeah, and I will say that and I think I still, even then, I think I only blocked maybe like a couple of people. My block list is not very long. And so I remember when I encounter people that actually do get me to be like, you know what, I'm not dealing with this, and blocking them. And that's only happened still a couple of times, which I think just speaks to the testament of how of the community being genuinely pretty good, with some unfortunate, people occasionally.
Well, that happens to everyone. But
Yeah.
I think that was it, unless you have something more that I didn't let you finish with.
No, I think I think we have had a very good discussion.
Well, in that case, thank you very much for coming back to this podcast, Tina. It was very interesting to hear your thoughts on Stormblood, and I am incredibly looking forward to hearing your opinion on Shadowbringers, because I can already see we're going to have some very fun discussions about that. If nothing else, I'm sure we can spend a lot of time collectively gushing over a certain Asian boy. But again, thank you very much for coming back. Thank you very much for taking your time to talk to me about these things and sharing your thoughts with the rest of us.
Anytime.
Yes, and the next time will be whenever you're done with Shadowbringers. So probably around Christmas. If you're looking for these podcasts, I would think around Christmas. That would not be surprising. But
I would not be surprised either. But I'm definitely taking a couple of weeks off. But we're at MSQ level 75 at the time of this recording, and I've started it a week ago. So we're going through it pretty quickly.
Exactly. But again, of course, there is some. Okay, let me spoil you on one thing. One thing. So far, the 5-point patch cycle is by far the best, most consequential, and most beloved patch cycle in the game. So we are definitely not doing anything until you actually hit 6.0, because there's just, even to the last moment, there is stuff that would need to be discussed on a podcast. But again, thank you very much for coming, Tina. It was very nice to have you. Thank you very much for listening to me, everyone. We shall be back. Eventually, I will put some proper material on this channel, but sadly, I'm also having some computer issues right now, so it might be a little while. But thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for listening to me and Tina blather on for a while. Hope you've been entertained. I hope we have been entertaining, and I hope to see all of you again next time. Bye!
Bye!